That is great. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Stephen. This is Eric and his mom, Karen. I'm Michael with Gateway Association, and this is Stephen from the Alberta Railway Museum, who is the President and Publicity Director.
I'm so glad we could meet up tonight. This sounds like a great chance to talk about the museum. Michael told me that Eric is quite interested in railways and trains in the museum, and volunteering at some point perhaps. So
yeah,
would I be able to share my screen, Michael?
Yeah, of course. I'm gonna mute myself. You go right ahead and take it away.
Awesome.
Can you make me co-host? Or what I'd like to do is show you a little presentation on the museum.
Oh.
And I know you've been out there, but it'll give you sort of an idea. I'll try to focus it about volunteering and the types of opportunities we have, and to show you that things we can do here.
Okay.
Thanks, Michael.
Since 1968. Wow.
I haven't been around that long.
No.
Actually, I started way back in 1987 as a summer staff member, and I worked out there for 2 summers, and then I went away, sort of started my career, and then started volunteering again in the mid-90s. So I guess you could say that there is a potential for advancement in the organization since I'm now president.
Okay.
So as mentioned, you said you've been out there before, so we are out in the rural Northeast, and that is one of our benefits and one of our challenges. So since we have trains, we need lots of room for the trains, and being out in the rural Northeast gives us that ability, and we're able to run our trains without disturbing anybody, blow the whistles. The neighbors don't complain. They're quite used to us now.
Okay. So
let's just do a little tour. We start off with welcoming people. You get to see the station on the right. This is an old switch stand that lets you control the movement of the train from one track to another, which is why we've got it as that sort of welcoming sign.
Okay.
Well, we start off at the station. The station was built in 1909 and was located on the northwest side of St. Albert. If you've been out to St. Albert, there is a replica station out there. It's a little bit smaller, but it has the benefit of having a full basement and running water that we don't have.
It looks very familiar. I can see the resemblance.
Yes.
Yeah.
The station is the original building, and so we use it as the ticket office. We use it as sort of the center for gathering everybody together when they come out. So this is where you would buy your tickets, your souvenirs, talk through the telegraph agent, and walk through some of the displays in the building. Well, this is Fred Pillapal. Fred is a former CN station agent, so he actually used to work in a station, and his role was to take the information from the train dispatcher and pass it on to the trains. And so you can see kind of here on the left side, you've got the sounder and a telephone.
Oh.
The sounder was for the Morse telegraph, and the telephone was so that he could actually contact the dispatcher. So over here is his telegraph key. And so he uses it and moves the lever back and forth to make dots and dashes. These guys are fantastic in that they can interpret these clicks and clacks. And it just sounds like little to me, but they can interpret it and make words out of it. So back in up until about the 1970s, when they improved train radios, this was the way that the dispatcher would get information to trains. So let's pretend a train left Edmonton, was going through St. Albert, and was bound for Whitecourt. When it left Edmonton, it was first off would be St. Albert, and at St. Albert, Fred here might give a message to the train saying that there is another train coming down the track from Whitecourt towards Edmonton, and that you'll meet at Sangudo, and that at Sangudo, the other train has to take the siding and you stay on the main line. And so Fred would type these instructions out, and he'd put them in a little holder, and he would pass it up to a train crew as a train went by. So this is one of the volunteer positions we have. Now, unfortunately, these gentlemen that worked as train operators or station agents, because they also would sell tickets to the public, are a diminishing group. There's no new people doing this. So we're always on the lookout for people that are interested in demonstrating Morse code. Like I say, it's a learned thing because it just sounds like picks and talks to me.
Yeah.
Here's our station platform. We've got lots of people out today. We've got a couple groups gathering. We're waiting for the train to come up. And so this is another volunteer job that we're always looking for people to do, is platform management. And it's a case of the train is coming soon, making sure that the kids stay on the station side of the railing there, make sure that we're not, kids like to swing on the chains, so we're trying to keep them from swinging on the chains. And as well, when people come in, as you can see sort of over here by the water tank, is when people show up, we'd like to welcome them and guide them into the station. We'll often find that people come up to the station, they've come up to the entrance and they say, okay, where do we go from here? And so that's a volunteer job, is we call it a station greeter, or the platform greeter, attendant. And the other thing they do is that when the train is coming, that they patrol the crossing. So we have a little crossing at the left side of the picture here where you go across the tracks to go see the train cars. Right. And so in order to, for safety's sake, we have a gate that we put down and we make sure that nobody comes running across. Because often what we'll find is that small children are excited, they see the train coming, like, oh, the train's coming, I gotta go, mommy, daddy, I gotta go to the train. And we want to be able to stop them in time so that nobody has an encounter with the train, and we want to make sure that it's far enough away so that it doesn't cause panic for us. So that's sort of one job altogether, the platform attendant, welcoming people, making sure that people know when the train's coming, and making sure that small children aren't running across the tracks. So here we are, we're getting ready to board the train. And here's another volunteer job, which is train conductor. And the train conductor is the boss of a train. So everybody thinks the engineer is in charge, but really the conductor is in charge, and the conductor tells the engineer when he can move the train. So the conductor's probably got the most important job on the train, because he gets to help everybody on and off the train, such as this young lady here, as well as punch the tickets, as well as telling the engineer when the train can move. Now, part of the job of being a conductor is that we have to know the rules of the railway. And so we have a whole bunch of manuals that you have to go through and learn and then write a test on, so that you are actually certified as a train conductor at the Alberta Railway Museum site. And our rules are based on the Alberta government rules. So being a train conductor doesn't just mean showing up and putting on a hat and having a pocket watch. There's a whole lot more to it. But that's okay. We all learn. I did the test this year and I got one wrong. I was very proud of myself. And it wasn't so much that I got it wrong, it's just there was two answers to the same question. Well, once we're on board, the train conductor will go through and punch the train tickets, do a little onboard talk about the train, about the engine, about the history of railways in Canada. And it's always a little bit different because I cater it to whoever's on the train. Sometimes you get people asking questions as you're going through and punching the tickets. Some people want to know about what the locomotive is, when the locomotive was built. Other people want to know about this passenger car. So there's all sorts of questions. And what I find is we have a booklet that gives you the information about the railway museum, about the cars that we have, about the trains. And it's a case that you can go through that and learn some of the materials. And so when we're doing our train rides, you can always have somebody on board talking about the train as a volunteer, and we can also still have the conductor punching the tickets. I include this map because a lot of our equipment comes from the Northern Alberta Railways. Northern Alberta Railways went from 1927 until 1981, when it was taken over by CN, Canadian National. Well, this is an interesting map because it shows how much of Alberta it covered. And at one point, it was the third largest railway in Canada. So it's kind of a neat map. We talk about it with people. We talk about the various destinations, about how you went from north of Edmonton. The track split off at a little place here called Carbondale. Mm-hmm. Then there's another track switch at Busby where you could go out to Barrhead. And much of this track is still in place today. And in fact, they've made some changes here. The track still does go through St. Albert, just north of here, north of Campbell. And it still goes through Carbondale and then all the way up through Smith and up to McLennan, Peace River. And now CN has built another branch north of Peace River that goes all the way up to the Northwest Territories. Wow. The line over here, they have changed it somewhat. And the line now follows a CN line north and then hooks up just north of Opal at a place called Egremont here. So just shows you the map and it shows you some of the things that are still out there. And the train does almost go up all the way to Fort McMurray.
And that's track that's still being used.
That is track that's still being used. So we will typically see 1 to 2 trains past our museum every day. Some of them go all the way up to Fort McMurray. Well, almost all the way up to Fort McMurray. And they're hauling products for the oil sands and products from the oil sands. And they're also, there's a lumber mill at Boyle. And you also see them hauling lumber.
Mm-hmm. Is it CN train or CP train?
It is CN trains. So almost all the track north of Edmonton is CN. There is one exception that goes through Fort Saskatchewan, which is CP, but for the most part, it is CN. That's interesting. Here's another volunteer project. It sort of shows actually a few volunteer projects. So in front of us, we see locomotive number 73, and this is the only remaining Northern Alberta Railway steam locomotive. We just did a cosmetic restoration on 73 this year. And what a cosmetic restoration means is that we painted it and we fixed up the windows and we fixed up the outside of the locomotive. We did not fix the inside. So this is not an operating locomotive. This is what we call in the museum business, a static display. So it's a display, we move it around, but it's not going to steam up into an actual steam locomotive. So that's one of the volunteer projects that we did this winter. So what did that involve? It involved scraping off the old paint off a locomotive. And so that included the boiler, included the wheels, included the cab, included the tender back here. One of our volunteers replaced the windows. Other volunteers worked on fixing up the headlight here. As part of the painting, we applied a decal to the side of the locomotive, or a stencil, which has Northern Alberta on it, so that we could paint that on. So we repainted the whole locomotive over the course of the winter, and that was a volunteer job done by several volunteers.
And the locomotive must have been moved somewhere indoor then for that?
Yes, we moved it indoors.
Okay.
We have 2 large shops, one of which is heated, so we moved it into the heated shop for the winter and did the painting.
And that's right there at the museum?
Right here at the museum.
Okay.
Other things you'll see in this picture, you'll see the grass here. Mm-hmm. And you're probably thinking, I'm sure Eric is thinking, yeah, okay, I see lots of grass. But just like at home, the grass needs to get mowed. And so we have volunteers that come out and mow the grass.
Wow.
We have these stairs here, and these stairs, as you see, are wooden. So every now and then you have to replace a board or two on the stairs. and then you have to paint the stairs to keep them looking good. The car behind here, where's my cursor gone? There we are. The car behind here in the white bottom with the brown top is a cattle car. And similar to Locomotive, that's looking a little shabby. So we're going to have to scrape it down and paint it. So another volunteer job. So you saw the glamorous volunteer job of being the conductor or the engineer, but these are the typical volunteer jobs that help keep the museum looking good and help keeping us preserving these old train cars.
Yeah.
Here's a picture of 73 in operation. And this is once again done by our volunteers. This picture dates to somewhere between 1969 and 1973 or so. I wasn't around then either. Okay, here's a few more volunteer jobs. Once again, we're in front of 73 here. And this was a summer tour group. So we had these kids come out, and they came out from Morinville, and they came out for a tour one summer. And so we have two tour guides. We have Ernie on the left here. And there's Ernie there. And we have Hans on the right here, who also brought out his grandson. So during the summer, we have, in a regular year, we will often have school groups out. And so one of the volunteer jobs is touring the kids around and showing them the various train cars, answering their questions, and giving them a little bit about the history of railways in Alberta. And when I say about the history of railways in Alberta, we don't really go into a lot of detail. We talk about how the first railway went through Calgary. The first railway into Edmonton was into the south side of Edmonton was 1891. Didn't cross the river until about 1902 or 1903. Went across the low-level bridge, which you've probably gone across in your car.
Mm-hmm.
And then the railway that went from Strathcona to Edmonton was called the Edmonton, Yukon, and Pacific Railway. And it was designed to eventually get to the Yukon and to the Pacific Ocean. And it got as far as Stony Plain. So it had a long, long title, but it didn't go very far. So when we're doing tours, we talk about the trains, we talk about a little bit about the history of railways, and we just try to educate people. And of course, everybody has questions, and people ask questions about the locomotives, about the caboose, when the locomotives were built. Questions will be, we have 1392 here on the left, which is a steam locomotive. We have 9000 on the right, which is a diesel locomotive. What's the difference between a steam locomotive and a diesel locomotive? How does a steam locomotive work? And when we talk about how does a steam locomotive work, I talk about fire and water, and I talk about how we heat up the water using the fire, and the water turns to steam. And nowadays I talk to kids about when you heat up a mug of water in your microwave, how you see the steam coming off, and that steam goes down into cylinders and moves the wheels, which moves the train down the track. And then the diesel locomotive is more similar to your car, where it uses diesel fuel or a form of gasoline, which goes into a cylinder, which compresses, and a spark goes into, and it creates an explosion, which moves the piston and makes the train go from there. Fire and water, I understand. The diesel is all sort of magic to me.
Yeah.
Here's a picture of 9000 in an earlier time. This is outside of Vancouver. And the reason I show this picture in a tour is for a number of reasons. First of all, it shows that our locomotive was an actual operating locomotive. Here it is operating. It's in a different paint scheme than it was in the previous picture. In the previous picture, it was green and gold. Here it's now in the red with the black and white stripes, but the locomotive behind is in the green and gold. Other things you see here, you see the box car, and you see various freight cars. So just sort of shows the whole railway operation.
Mm-hmm.
Here's our other steam locomotive, 1392, and this is our operating steam locomotive. So you see here, she's sitting ready for her next trip. And we've got our engineer walking towards the train. That's Terry, he's an engineer. Becoming an engineer is a longer process than becoming a conductor, because to become an engineer, you have to do the training at the museum, and then you have to do more tests. And if you want to become certified on a steam engine, there's a whole bunch more and more tests that are governed by the government of Alberta. So I've never decided to become an engineer. I've operated the engines before, but there's too much thinking in my head. I'm better at talking than moving levers back and forth. Oh, here's Jim. Jim is a member of our train crew. He's a volunteer as well. We're all volunteers.
Yeah.
He's the fireman in this picture. And so what that means is he's not putting out the fire, but he's making sure the fire stays on in the steam engine. You can see in the center of the picture here, this orange glowing spot. This is where the actual fire in the steam locomotive is. And on our steam locomotive, we don't use coal, we actually use oil. We use like a fuel oil that you would put in your car. So what Jim does as a fireman is he makes sure that the fire stays hot enough to make steam, but not too hot. And the lever he's got his hand on controls the flow of oil into the fire.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can see all these different gauges here that you have to pay attention to, which once again is too much thinking for me. So I like to be out with the people as opposed to being hot in the cab.
Yeah.
Each to their own, though.
Yeah.
The engineers will often say, you know, keep the people in the cab. I'm happy up here in the engine. So keep the people in the passenger car. I'm happy up here in the engine cab. So here you see some more people, some more volunteers. We've got on our left here, we have Barry. Barry is what we call a brakeman. He helps operate the train. He hooks up the train, make sure that all the brakes are working. And he's out here with his family. And this is his dad, the engineer. His mom, Judy, is in charge of the gift shop. So here's three people from one family that come out and volunteer at the museum. And here's their kids.
That's cool.
Barry's kids, not Terry's. And then back here, we've got our engineer whose name is Ted, and our other engineer here, Colin, or excuse me, not our engineer, conductor, Colin. And our conductor in this case is having a word with the engineer, probably telling the engineer not to go move the train so fast. Here's the best way to send, you know, Eric's too big for this now, but if you had younger kids, this is how we suggest sending the kids to grandma for summer. Put them in the mail bag, tie up the mail bag, and then we throw the mail bag off a train at grandma's house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Special delivery.
Special delivery. This is a mail car, and way back in the day, this was actually what we called a mail express car. So it had two parts. It had the mail part, and you could walk up to the train in the station and mail a letter.
Oh.
Now, I have some letters. My mom grew up in Jasper, and I have some letters of hers that she would mail on the train. She said, I have to finish my letter. It's 2 o'clock and the train comes at 2:30, so I have to run down to the station to mail my letter.
Wow.
And then they would sort all the letters that they picked up. They would pick up the mail bags too from the regular post office, and they would sort the mail on the train and deliver it to each of the stations in these bags.
Huh.
So all these little cubby holes you see up at the back of the car there, that's where all the mail would go to the various places.
Yeah.
The other side of this car is the express part. And express, you can think of ordering something from Amazon. Say Eric wants the latest Nintendo game, and Eric orders it from Amazon and it comes in a package. Well, what used to happen, as opposed to it coming direct to your door, you would go down to the station to pick it up and it would ship on the train. Nowadays, it ships by truck. So volunteer jobs here, talking about the mail car, talking about express shipments, talking about how you can send the little kids to grandma's for the summer.
Ooh.
Here's another car that volunteers talk about. This is the cook car. And these boys here are from the 4-H club, and they came out one day just for a tour. And the cook car was not for the fine dining for the passengers. This was for the work crews. These are the crews that worked on the railway. These are the guys that helped put the gravel down, helped put the rails down, helped put the ties down. And of course, they needed to get fed because they'd be out working on the railway. So just when you're out working in the yard, Eric, and at some point you want to have dinner because you'll get hungry.
Yeah.
So here's another volunteer job that we can do.
Yeah.
So we talk about the cook car. We talk about how the cook got up at 5 in the morning to get the breakfast ready. And then after the breakfast got ready, she'd have to clean up. And then she'd start making pies. And then she'd have to make lunch. And then after lunch, she'd have a rest. And then it's time to make dinner. Like, that was a hard job. And you usually only had 1 or 2 cooks on a train. Now, here's where we get a little fancier. This was the superintendent's car. So this was the boss's car on the railway. So nowadays, if you're the big boss of a company, you might have a private airplane. Well, back in the days of the railway, if you're the boss of the railway, you had your own private railway car. Why would you want an airplane? You'd have a railway car here like this, and you would take it up and down your railway. So I showed you that map that went up to Fort McMurray and went up to all the way up to McLennan and all the way up to Northwest Territories. And this is the type of car they would have. You can see we've got the table here. So you could pull into a town such as Westlock, and you would meet with all the people in Westlock. You might meet with somebody that's sending parcels into Edmonton. So you could meet with a person there. You could meet with a person that ran the local elevator. You meet with the Chamber of Commerce people, the business people in town, to get them to use your railway for shipments as opposed to using the truck. So this is why you had this railway car here. You can see that we do need to do a little bit of restoration work on it, that the walls need some work and the floor needs a bit of work. So once again, 2 volunteer jobs, fixing up stuff and talking about stuff. That's sort of what we do a lot of. We do a lot of fixing up. We do a lot of talking about, and sometimes we actually get to move the trains around, which is the fun part.
Yeah. Well, that's cool.
Here's an aerial view. You can get to show the size of our collection and the challenges with our railway collection. And let's pick the car in front here, this blue one. This car is about 28 or 29 meters long. But now we need to redo the roof on this car. So what we have is we have a roll of rubber film that we put over the car, but it has to stretch that 29 meters. And in doing so, we have to be on top of the car. So we try to make scaffolding all along the car. And then we have to put the glue on and roll the glue on, and then put the rubber roofing down. And then we have to replace the stuff that we took off on the roof. So, doing restoration work is a lot of work.
Yeah. For sure.
Even these cars you see over here, these brown ones, those are still about 15 meters long. And so if we have to start fixing them up, we have to start replacing. They're made out of wood. They have wood siding. And so we have to replace all the wood on them. So we have people that are doing carpentry. We have people that are doing rolling glue on a roof. We have people that are unscrewing chimney pipes. It's a whole group of different people doing different jobs. We all try to work together. Our challenge, of course, in the time of COVID is that we really can't work together indoors. We're not supposed to be gathering indoors. We do a little bit of work outdoors, and we try to be very much at least 6 feet apart and be social distanced. Another example of a restoration project was this Northern Alberta Railways locomotive number 302, also known as Chief Mustus. Chief Mustus was one of the chiefs on the south side of Lesser Slave Lake, and through his tribal area the railway ran. So they honored the chief with his name on one of the locomotives here.
Okay, cool.
We acquired it from CN. CN donated it to us about 8 or 10 years ago. This is what it looked like just before it came to us. You'll notice the very fancy plywood windows.
Yeah. See that there?
Yeah.
That's the window there.
So when we brought it to the museum, CN was kind enough to deliver it. This was sitting at Walker Yards.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
When we brought it to the museum, we had it sandblasted. And you can still see the plywood window, but you can see that most of the paint has been blasted off with sand to make painting easier. And then we brought it in the shop to paint it. Oh, and since then we have finished the windows, we have finished the painting, and we have lettered it. So that reminds me that I need to put another slide in here to show the finished product.
Okay. So this is back to original colors?
This is back to original colors. And this is the shop that I was talking about earlier where we did the painting of the other locomotive during the winter. So it is a maintenance shop. It has 2 tracks in it, and we can fit 1 full-size passenger car, 1 to 2 locomotives, depending on the size of the locomotives. So it has a pit as well. So if we need to work on the underside of a locomotive, we can actually go down and work underneath the locomotive, wearing a hard hat, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
Here's your perfect restoration job. This was a little passenger station at a town called Peavey, or a place called Peavey, which would be just north of Morinville. What did we do with this? We fixed up the siding, the wood siding. We fixed up the window, and we painted it. There's your average volunteer job. What are we doing? Fixing up wood, fixing up windows, and painting. And you can see too that the grass needs cutting.
Yeah, I see that, Eric.
Yeah.
That looks more like weeds than
Yeah.
grass.
Yeah, it looks kind of like weeds. Once again, that's our challenge of trying to keep the museum looking pristine for our visitors, trying to make it look good, but it's always work.
Yes.
And it's all done by volunteers.
Yeah.
We do hire people to do track work because some of that is beyond our volunteer capabilities. Here, replacing a roof.
Oh, wow. That's cool, hey?
Yeah.
Yeah. The top of a train.
Yeah.
Once again, painting. We have the old Canadian National Railways logo here, CNR. And so we put the stencil on the side of the train, and then we painted in white to get the logo on, white and green. So there you see it complete.
Wow, that's cool, isn't it, Eric?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's the outside of a railway car. We need to cut down those little bushes growing in front of it. Need to fix up the roof. Here's an example of what it looks like inside. When we did the initial work on it, we discovered that it has these little windows up top with stained glass in them.
Wow.
We took out the windows and scraped out the paint that was painted over them and put them back in. Over underneath the windows, you'll notice that the roof is leaking. And now we need to fix up the roof. Right now, this railway car is tarped. It's underneath a big white vinyl blanket, if you want to call it that, because we don't have enough time or resources to fix it up right now. And it's stable underneath there, and it's not getting any worse. So some of the time we don't actually fix the cars. Some of the time we leave them for later, but try to make sure that they're protected.
Right.
Here's another example of the inside of that car. This is some of the woodwork inside the car. This is called Inlaid Woodwork. So what's happened here is they've taken very thin slices of wood and used it to decorate other pieces of wood. And this is a berth which
Oh, okay.
folds down from the wall and makes into a bunk bed.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned about doing track work. And some of the track work we do ourselves if we just need to replace a tie. If we need to do a whole lot of track work, we'll hire a company because it's a whole lot of work to do track work. You got to be young and strong like Eric, not old. And
Yeah, it looks like a lot of work.
it is a lot of work. It's heavy lifting, and those ties are quite heavy. And after you put the tie in, you have to put the rock in around it. And then you're hitting the rock with, we call tamping. You're using a big bar to push the rock underneath the ties, and then you're spiking the ties in place.
Wow. That's pretty cool, hey? And now look how it's all finished.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Over here, you'll see two of our cabooses. We have a CN caboose and a Northern Alberta Railway caboose. These are two other things that people love climbing into, especially little kids. They like going up into the cupola, the top here of the caboose, or sitting in the bay window. And it's nice to have somebody to walk and help kids in these railway cars and talk about what the caboose did and how the conductor would sit up top in the caboose and wave at everybody. There's another volunteer job. Another volunteer job you'll see over here at our little fire hall. You'll notice there's a barbecue and little picnic tables. What we do is we have birthday parties.
Oh.
And we have kids come out for birthday parties. We've actually had some adults come out for birthday parties. We bring out the barbecue. They can barbecue up hamburgers or hot dogs or whatever they like, and have a little birthday party. We need people that will help set up the birthday party, bring visitors over, make sure that the barbecue works, make sure that we have propane, get the picnic tables arranged, and typically put up a little sign saying private party so that people don't join in.
Yeah. Okay.
And I talked about Judy before, the gift shop manager, and here's a view of two of our volunteers inside the gift shop. These are two sisters, Rosemary on the left and Kathy on the right, and they have been volunteering out there for a long, long time. That makes them sound old, so I won't say a long, long time. They've been volunteering out there for a few years, and they're great in the gift shop. And although they're ladies, it doesn't mean that only ladies work in the gift shop. We have guys that work in the gift shop.
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes work in the gift shop if it's busy, so long as somebody shows me how to use the cash register again.
Right.
I always forget how.
Looks like an old cash register.
It is an old cash register. It's an antique. And we're trying to find a new computerized system that we can afford that will work and do what we want, including sell tickets over the internet so that when Eric and Karen want to come out, or Eric and Eric's mom, that they can buy their tickets in advance, and so that we can plan times with COVID so that we don't have too many people at one time.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. Cool.
All sorts of volunteer jobs. As I said before, we have volunteer jobs where you're fixing stuff, where you're running the trains, where you're painting things, talking to visitors, helping visitors, showing them around, working in the gift shop. Here's an example of our train crew. That one guy sort of looks like me because that is me, but I think it was a few pounds ago.
I thought that looked like you. That's cool. Oh, and that, so can you go back for a second? So that stick the fellow in the vest is holding is what they would pass the messages on to the engineers or the conductors with, right?
Yes, exactly.
See that stick with the big hoop?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They would put the piece of paper in there. You can sort of see the piece of paper there. And as a train went by, the engineer or the conductor would stick his arm out and grab the hoop and take out the piece of paper and then throw the hoop out of the train. He wouldn't keep it with him.
Yeah.
Now, this would be, the poor station agent would then have to go pick it up, which wouldn't be too bad in the summer if you had to go walk several meters, wouldn't be so bad. In the winter, that might not be so fun when you had to search through the snow to try to find the hoop that got thrown from the caboose or from the engine.
Yes. Yeah. That's funny.
Here you see our big hook, our crane. Our crane is operational, and you'll see two of our volunteers here. One of the great things about the museum that I really love is that our volunteers are of all ages. Our youngest volunteer right now is about 16 years old. He's in grade 10.
Oh,
And this is Ted. Ted is trying to remember if he's 84 or if he's 85. I lose track.
wow.
And he still operates a steam engine. Ted was an engineer on the railway.
Mhm.
He worked on the railway for 35 or 40 years. He retired, but when Ted worked on the railway, when he started, he was working on steam engines. Oh, he is one of our steam engineers. The last steam engine ran on CN in 1960, which is, gosh, 40, 70 years ago. I can tell you that when Ted started working on steam engines, he was a much younger man.
Yeah. No kidding. Wow.
As I
Wow.
say, the reason I like to show this picture just shows that we work together, and it doesn't matter if we're old or young, everybody is a volunteer, and
Yeah.
everybody works together. And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what our abilities are, because we all have different abilities. I'm
Mhm.
great at talking, but I'm not really good at using the levers in the locomotive to make the train go down the track.
Right.
Ted can make the train go up and down the track, but doesn't, he'll talk to visitors, but he's not really comfortable doing a speech on the train.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's a couple of other volunteers.
Cats.
These are our hardest working volunteers because they guard the coffee pot. We've actually had to replace our coffee pot more than once. We got some kittens in, and the kittens got a little bit rambunctious and knocked the coffee pot off and broke the glass. So we had to get a new coffee maker. The coffee maker is one of those vital pieces of equipment at the museum, and volunteers make the coffee too.
Oh. Cool.
Yeah.
And this is my second to last slide. And the reason I present this one is because this is what the museum is all about to me. It's about this little boy here that's watching the train go by, and he's just so excited about it.
Mhm.
And this steam engine is thundering down the track. And what I love about the museum and what makes me come back to museum is little boys and little girls. It doesn't matter if it's a boy or a girl, they can all come out, they can all have fun, they get to see the train, and they get to engage their senses. They get to feel the train going down the track. They get to feel the heat coming off the steam engine. They
Yeah.
hear the whistle. They'll
Mhm.
smell the smoke.
Mhm.
When we walk through the museum, we're touching the train cars, we're climbing up on them. So it's a very sensory experience. And as I said, for volunteers, what we look for is somebody that wants to come out and help. We all have different abilities. We're all good at different things. I do a lot of the publicity. And what the publicity means is that I'm contacting the newspapers and the radio stations and the TVs and talking about the museum. Other people are making sure that the trains are ready to run, that we have locomotive fuel. Other people are doing the training for the engineers and the conductors. How do people come out and volunteer? They call up, they'll send an email. Right now, we're doing very, very limited volunteer work, just outside stuff that we can do 6 feet apart. But I've shown you some of the different things that we can have volunteers do. And we're
Right.
always happy to have people come out and help out.
Yeah.
And the 16-year-old fellow that comes out, he's passionate about train engines, about locomotives. And we have him sit in the locomotive and people tour through the locomotive, and he tells them all about how the locomotive works.
Wow.
The 18-year-old fellow that comes out is not really, he's very shy. he works on the station garden. We have a station garden with flowers and plants that he helps maintain. And he also does some of the other volunteer work. He's helped fix roofs and pound nails, cut grass, and he helps the place look neat and tidy.
Yeah.
We all have different jobs we do, and often I'll go out there on a Saturday and I won't have a specific job to do. I'll just see what's happening, where I can lend a hand. And sometimes it's, sometimes I'm the guy holding the flashlight. Sometimes I'll try to hammer in, but I don't hammer very well. Most of my nails go crooked. So they usually have me hold the piece of wood in place, that type of thing. We have summer staff, and usually what we try to do is we try to hire people that are in university. We usually try to hire people that are in jobs that are, or in university courses that are related to working with the public. Last summer, we had 4 summer staff. One of them was in the video program. I forget exactly what it's called. Video program at MacEwan University. Another one was training to be a physiotherapist. She actually has a job now. So she won't be coming back. Another one was working on her university degree in public relations. And the fourth one was a university student, and she was taking drama courses to act and sing.
Mhm.
The reason we hired these individuals was that they all had different ways of relating to the public. They all were willing to work with the public. And unfortunately, last year, we didn't even open to the public. So
Right.
a lot of the skills that we hired them for, we couldn't use. So I spent a lot of time painting, but the video fellow put together a video tour of the museum that you can see on our website, and he did some promotional videos. The other ones, they worked on a little story about 2 kids taking the train into Edmonton from St. Albert for the day. And they worked on a little, they did some work on the displays and fixing up some of the older displays, making them new displays, or I'm trying to think of the right word. You'd say refreshing the displays, I guess would be the right word.
Yeah.
So making new signs, changing the signage a little bit, making the language simpler, all that type of thing. So that gives you an idea of the types of things we do at the museum, the types of jobs, volunteer jobs. Really, the only people that we hire at the museum are summer staff, and that's depends on the year. This year, it's funny, last year we had funding for 4 students and we had to work to keep them busy. This year we hope to open, but we only have funding for 2 students.
Oh,
It's all up in the air.
yeah, yeah.
Here's my information. I'm always available, happy to answer questions.
Okay.
If Eric has questions, if you have questions, you can watch our Facebook page. That's the most up-to-date information, and that will keep you posted on opening for the season and any volunteer activities that we have.
Okay.
Stephen,
We're
are you
hoping
the person to contact if someone was to want to volunteer at the museum?
Yes, please.
Okay.
When we have people that come out that want to volunteer, I like to give them a tour around the museum and introduce them to our various volunteers that are working on the jobs around the museum. I'll take you into the woodworking shop and show you where we're making boards for restoring the sides of the railway cars. I'll take you into the car restoration shop and show you which cars we're working on, as well as some cars that are long-term projects. Then we'll walk down and we'll talk to the folks at the Locomotive shop, and we'll typically end up at the station and talk to the folks that are working at the station. It's a way that we try to introduce our volunteers to are active volunteers. It's always a challenge. It's, as you know, Eric, when you go to school and you go from one year to the other, you change classes, you might work, be in different classes with different people. And what we want to do is get you to know the various volunteers at the museum so that you feel comfortable working here.
Yeah, right, right.
Now, I spent the whole time talking here. I'm sorry. Did you have questions, Eric? Was there something that you'd like to talk about or ask about?
I think you answered some of the ones we had asked, right?
That's right.
How long he'd worked there and
Yeah.
what he did at the museum.
Yeah.
What about the other
Uh,
question?
On your background with trends.
Oh, he wanted to know what your background was with trains. Is that your job, or is it just something that was always an interest of yours?
That's a great question, Eric. It's always been an interest of mine. And it might have been because my grandparents lived in Jasper. And going to Jasper to see the grandparents, we often took the train.
Mm-hmm.
There was 4 kids in the family, and I think Mom felt it was easier to take the train than to try to space out the kids in the car.
Yeah.
In Jasper, I like to go down to the station and watch the trains. That was part of it. My grandfather liked trains. My dad likes trains. I guess it was an inherited interest.
Mm-hmm.
I remember going out to the Railway Museum as a boy. And then when I was in university, I actually worked for one summer doing promotions for Via Rail. So I got to ride the Via trains
Oh, okay.
around Alberta, which was a fun job.
Oh,
That was a great summer job, actually.
yeah.
And then a few years later, I needed another job, and there was a summer position open at the Alberta Railway Museum. So I applied, and that started my career, if you want to call it that, at the museum.
Oh,
My career is an unpaid job.
yeah.
As president, a lot of my job is working with the volunteers to determine which projects we want to work on next, which cars we want to restore next. And then there's doing things like writing grants. And a grant application is when I write to the government of Alberta and ask for money to help restore a railway car, or an organization such as the Edmonton Community Foundation. Lots of different groups out there that we approach for money to help do the restoration work.
Mhm.
Our admissions help pay to keep the lights on in the museum, to keep the utilities, to keep the heat, and grants help pay for restoration work.
Great. Oh, okay. Interesting. Oh. Well, Jasper is a favorite place of Eric's, and it's not where his love of trains started, but it certainly got a lot to do with it. So what do we do every day when we go to Jasper?
Busy. This season.
We go to the train station. We sit there and we watch the
The
trains go by
trains.
every day.
And what could be a better activity?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love watching the trains go by. I like seeing the different grain cars. Some of them say taking over to break. Some of them are from Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
The different cars that go by, the locomotives. It's so much fun. It's entertaining because it's like watching a movie.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to, like I'm watching a movie in a different language. You don't really have to understand the words because you just get to see the pictures. I find it so enjoyable. I was at Jasper last September and I was having lunch and just sat having my lunch and watched the trains go by.
Yep.
Eric, I think we have a lot in common.
Great.
Yeah.
And last year when we were there, of course, the train station is closed.
Mhm.
So we took our chairs and sat there and watched.
Oh, perfect.
Didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. We can't go to Jasper and not do that,
No.
right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. just the excitement of seeing the light coming or hearing the train, and then
Yeah.
trying to guess if it's going to be a long train or a short train,
Okay, from Edmonton.
or where if it came from Edmonton or where it came from.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. It's very exciting. We train spot all the way there and back.
Okay, spot on.
Yeah.
It's a great place to spot trains. Jasper is on the main line. Well, that means it's the main railway. So any train going from Edmonton to Vancouver or going from Vancouver to Edmonton will go through Jasper.
Okay.
Also, a lot of the trains that go up to Grand Prairie will go up to Jasper. There's coal that goes through Jasper heading towards Vancouver that comes from south of Edson. There's all sorts of different trains that are going through Jasper. And of course, on a regular summer, you'd also see the Via train go through 3 times a week.
Yes, and we've taken the Via train. We were telling Michael how long a ride it is, because you always have to let the cargo trains go. They take priority, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, but that was fun too, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yes, he's absolutely a huge fan of all kinds of trains, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the Rocky Mountaineer.
Oh yeah, welcome on now.
Yeah, but we can't afford to go on that one.
Yeah, that one's a little pricey. Yes.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
I was at a railway convention in BC about 2 years ago, and as part of the convention, we went down to the Rocky Mountaineer station, and those trains are pretty nice. They've got their own station. Those seats are nice and big and leather, and they've got heated seats and cooling seats, and
oh wow,
it's fancy.
Yeah, you're riding in luxury, I guess, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, so you've loved trains for a long time, haven't you?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. For a long time. Yeah. So it's certainly definitely an interest of his, where he would enjoy volunteering. I'm not quite sure. We'd have to talk about that. I think he got excited when he saw the Conductor, and so I think that would be a stretch, though, unless he could do that job with a buddy, probably.
Well, we could certainly do that.
Yeah.
I find that when I'm Conductor, it's going through and punching tickets, especially if we're having a busy train and it's a full train, that by the time I finish punching tickets, the train ride is done and I haven't had a chance to do the onboard speech.
Oh, okay.
Eric could always go through and help punch tickets.
Yeah.
And we always need help loading and unloading passengers. We always stand at the door to the car and make sure that nobody slips and falls. So there's another job that Eric could help with.
Yeah.
Eric can help guide people as they come up to the station.
Yeah. Yeah.
Help out on the platform.
Yeah. Those sorts of things I think would interest you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what we want in the volunteers. We want to have people come out and do what they're interested in.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And during the week, my day job is I sell office equipment. I sell paper, copiers, printers, that type of thing. So this is nice to come out because it's totally different than what I do during the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet when the printer needs fixing, guess who gets called?
Of course. Yeah, Eric's not much of a talker unless you get to know him really well and he gets excited about something. Then sometimes you do a lot of talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's pretty quiet guy normally.
That's okay. He'll fit in still.
Yeah.
Some guys like to talk, and some people talk a lot and don't say much of anything, and some people say a little, but it means a whole lot.
Yeah, it's true. That's true. Yeah. So it's pretty exciting though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a great opportunity. I think it could be, for sure. Yeah.
I think it'd be fun.
Yeah.
Always looking to have somebody else help out in the train, and Eric would be a great buddy to have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think buddying up with somebody would probably would make it the most successful for him. I think. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that would be awesome.
Well, what I'd like to invite you to do is keep in touch. You've got the museum email, you've got my phone number,
Yeah.
and keep an eye on Facebook, and
Yeah.
we'll see what happens with the COVID guidelines. We're hoping to open up. Fingers are crossed. Fort Edmonton says they're going to open July 1st. We're thinking maybe mid-July, maybe August, but we're really not sure. I have a medical specialist coming out on Friday, and we're going to tour the museum.
Oh.
And she's going to give us advice in terms of how we can safely operate and how we might be able to do tours through the museum.
Yeah.
Or have people tour through the museum safely.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah. Well, I have heard from somebody that works at Alberta Health Services, they're anticipating a 4th wave. So,
oh no.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows when it'll be back, but.
I was hoping this would be the circuit breaker.
Yeah, me too. But yeah, so I don't know how quickly they're anticipating that to happen. I guess that would take a crystal ball to know that, but yeah. So hopefully we get some summer activities back and running, and right, if everybody does what they need to do to make it happen.
We'll certainly hope so.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It was a great presentation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for coming.
Okay.
Nice to meet you, Eric, and Eric's mom, Karen. And to see Michael in person. We've talked on the phone.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. No, it's been wonderful.
Thank you so much for your time today, Stephen. That was a wonderful presentation, and we really appreciate it. And clearly your passion for trains shines very brightly. It's very clear you have it, and Eric too, and I'm really glad I could help put the two of you together.
Yeah, this is terrific. And if you do run into other people that have interest in trains or anything like that that we've shown as volunteer activities, I'm always happy to talk to people.
Cool.
Excellent. Well, I'll let everybody go now and get their evening going at home. I'm sure you've had a long day at work, Stephen. So thank you so much to everyone. Eric, thanks so much for taking the time with us today.
Yep.
And Stephen, you too. And everybody, I hope you have a great night.
You guys,
thank you so much.
Thank you again for everything.
Thanks. Good night.
Okay. Bye-bye.